It was a quiet night, the kind where the whole world seems to fall asleep at the same time. The large house stood still under the dim garden lights, looking almost like it was holding its breath. Inside, everything was dark except for a soft glow escaping from the kitchen window. The rest of the staff had gone home hours ago, and the house should have been empty except for the live-in maid, who was sleeping in her small room near the back. The Tycoon, known to everyone simply as Mr. Rafik, pushed open the front door with slow, tired movements. He had returned earlier than expected from a business trip that was supposed to last 2 more days. The long flight had drained him, and he only wanted a hot shower and a few hours of sleep. But as soon as he stepped inside, he felt something was off. At first, he thought it was just his imagination. Travel often left him wired and unable to relax. But then he heard it. A light clinking sound. Soft, rhythmic, not loud enough to be alarming, but strange enough to catch his attention. He stood still, listening. Another sound, water running. Not a steady stream, just short bursts, like someone turning the tap on and off. He frowned. Why would anyone be in the kitchen this late? It was already close to 3 in the morning. His staff never stayed up that long. They followed a strict schedule, and the kitchen usually looked untouched by midnight. Curious and a little uneasy, he walked quietly down the hallway, careful not to startle anyone who might be inside. As he got closer, the light grew brighter, spilling through the crack under the kitchen door. The sounds became clearer now. Metal tapping, plates rubbing, water splashing. He slowly pushed the door open. What he saw made him stop in his tracks. Standing on a small wooden stool near the sink was a young girl, thin, small, and clearly exhausted. Her hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, and her shirt looked slightly oversized, as if she had rushed out of bed and grabbed whatever she could find. The faint shadows under her eyes showed she hadn't slept much. She stretched her arm carefully to reach the stack of dishes, using both hands to hold each plate steady while scrubbing it. It was his maid's daughter. He blinked, almost doubting what he was seeing. She wasn't supposed to be here at this hour. She wasn't even supposed to be doing kitchen work. She was just a child around 12 or 13. She usually visited her mother after school for a short time, staying quietly in the little room and doing her schoolwork. But this was different. She was washing dishes at 3 in the morning. He didn't say anything for a few seconds. He simply watched her. She didn't notice him at first. She was fighting to stay focused, blinking slowly as if sleep kept pulling her down. For a moment, she swayed slightly, catching herself before she dropped a dish. The sight made his stomach tighten with worry. She finally sensed someone behind her and turned quickly. Her eyes widened when she saw him, and the sponge slipped from her hand, dropping into the sink with a soft splash. She froze, her small shoulders stiffening like she had been caught doing something terribly wrong. "Sir, she began, but her voice cracked. He stepped forward, keeping his tone calm so she wouldn't panic. "Why are you doing this? And at this hour?" She looked down at her feet, her fingers twisting nervously. She didn't answer. Instead, she picked up the sponge again, as if hoping to finish the work quickly and escape the conversation. He gently reached out and took the sponge from her hand, placing it aside. "You shouldn't be doing this," he said firmly but softly. "Tell me what's going on." She swallowed hard. Her lips trembled, but she still didn't speak. He could see she was frightened. Not of him, but of the situation. Like she was holding something deep inside. Something she didn't know how to say. He pulled out a chair and sat down, hoping it would make him look less intimidating. "It's late," he said. "You need to be asleep." "Where is your mother?" "In her room," the girl whispered. "She doesn't know I'm here." That answer surprised him even more. "Then why are you here?" he asked gently. Her fingers curled tightly around the edge of her shirt. She kept glancing at the plates, at the sink, anywhere except his eyes. She seemed torn between telling the truth and hiding it. "I just wanted to help," she finally said. But he could tell it wasn't the full story. Helping was one thing, but this? Washing dishes secretly at 3 in the morning? No child would choose to do that unless something much bigger was pushing them. He knew he couldn't force her to speak, but he also couldn't let her continue like this. "You don't have to be afraid," he said, keeping his voice warm. "You can tell me anything. I'm not angry." She bit her lip, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and guilt. It looked like she wanted to tell him, but the words were stuck. "I won't tell your mother if you don't want me to," he added quietly. "Just tell me the truth." That seemed to break something inside her. She took a shaky breath. "I didn't go to school today," she whispered. He blinked, startled. "You didn't go to school?" She shook her head. "Why not?" Her throat tightened, and she hesitated again. I needed to work." He stared at her, not understanding at first. Work? A child missing school to work? In his own house? "What do you mean by work?" he asked. Her eyes finally lifted to meet his, and he saw the sadness in them. "I clean. Not just here. Other houses too. I try to help my mother. She's behind on rent. She doesn't know I come here at night. I thought if I cleaned the kitchen before the morning staff came, maybe someone would give her more hours or pay her more. I just wanted to help." Her voice cracked as she spoke, and she quickly wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. He felt a heaviness settle in his chest. She wasn't doing this for herself. She was doing it out of fear, out of love, out of desperation. "Have you been skipping school for this?" he asked quietly. She nodded slowly. "How long?" "A few weeks," she whispered. He leaned back in the chair, stunned. How had no one noticed? How had her teachers not contacted her mother? What kind of pressure had this child been carrying alone? The girl looked terrified, waiting for him to scold her. But he didn't. Instead, he felt something shift inside him. A sense of responsibility. A sense of guilt even, knowing that someone under his roof had been suffering silently. He stood up and gently guided her away from the sink. "Enough for tonight," he said softly. "You need sleep." She nodded, wiping her face again. She climbed down from the stool slowly, her movements heavy with exhaustion. He opened the kitchen door for her. "Go to your mother's room. Rest. We'll talk in the morning." She hesitated. "Please don't tell her," she whispered. "She'll be upset." I didn't want her to worry. He looked at her small, tired face and realized how much weight she had been carrying. No child should ever feel responsible for rent. No child should be sneaking into kitchens at 3 in the morning to wash dishes. "We'll talk in the morning," he repeated. His voice remained calm, but his mind was already racing. She nodded again and walked quietly down the hall, her footsteps soft and slow. When she disappeared around the corner, he stayed in the kitchen for a long moment, staring at the half-washed dishes, the soaked sponge, the stool pushed near the sink. He knew he wouldn't be sleeping anymore that night. Something had to be done. And starting tomorrow, everything was going to change for that little girl. The next morning arrived slowly, with soft sunlight spreading through the long hallway of the large house. It felt peaceful, almost too peaceful for what had happened the night before. While most of the staff moved quietly through their usual routines, the Tycoon, Mr. Rafik, sat alone at the dining table, a cup of tea in front of him that he had barely touched. His thoughts were too heavy for breakfast. He kept replaying the scene in the kitchen. The small girl standing on a stool, her tired eyes, her voice trembling as she confessed she had been skipping school just to work. Felt wrong on so many levels. She was a child. She should have been asleep at that hour, not washing his dishes in secret. He took a slow breath and rubbed his forehead. He needed to understand everything clearly. Why had no one told him? Why had her mother kept this hidden? How had the girl managed to slip into the kitchen night after night without anyone noticing? He had trusted his staff to maintain order, but this situation had slipped right past him. He knew he couldn't start the day pretending nothing happened. Something inside him wouldn't allow it. A soft knock at the dining room door pulled him from his thoughts. One of the house helpers stepped in and bowed her head politely. "Sir, breakfast is ready. Should I bring it now?" He shook his head. "No, thank you. Not yet." The helper nodded and left, closing the door quietly behind her. A few moments later, he stood up and walked toward the small hallway where the living quarters for the living staff were located. He moved with slow, thoughtful steps. He didn't want to storm in angrily. He wasn't angry, just deeply troubled. He reached the door of the maid's room. He hesitated before knocking, unsure how to begin this conversation. He didn't want to blame her, but he needed answers. He knocked gently. There was a shuffling sound inside, and the door opened. The maid Zara stood there, still adjusting her scarf. She looked surprised to see him. "Sir, you're awake early. Is everything all right?" He studied her face. She looked tired too, but not in the same way as her daughter. Hers was the look of someone who had been carrying worries for too long. "May I speak with you?" he asked. "Of course, sir. Please come in." He stepped inside the small room. It was simple but neatly arranged. The girl sat on the bed, her hands folded in her lap. When she saw him, she lowered her gaze. She looked ashamed, as if she expected he had already told her mother everything. He nodded to her gently before turning to her mother. "I need to ask something," he started carefully. "Last night, I found your daughter in the kitchen at 3 in the morning. She was washing the dishes." Zara's eyes widened in shock. "What? No, she wasn't. She was asleep when I checked. There must be some mistake." Her daughter looked down, her small hands shaking slightly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Zara turned to her, confused. "What is he talking about? You were in bed." The girl swallowed hard. "I got up after you slept." Zara stared at her in disbelief. "Why? Why would you do that?" The girl didn't speak. Her face turned pale, and she clenched her hands together even tighter. The room fell quiet for a moment. Mr. Rafiq stepped forward gently. "She said she hasn't been going to school for weeks." Zara's breath caught. Her eyes filled with panic. She turned sharply toward her daughter. "What? You haven't been going to school? But every morning you said." The girl burst into tears. "I'm sorry. I didn't want you to worry. I thought I could help. We were behind again. I heard you talking to the landlord. I didn't want us to lose the room. I just wanted to help earn money." Zara covered her mouth with her hand, tears filling her eyes instantly. She sat down beside her daughter and pulled her close, holding her tightly. "You shouldn't do that. You're a child. You should be in school. You don't understand how dangerous, how difficult, how wrong this is." Her daughter cried harder. "But I was scared. You work so much. You come home tired every day. I heard you crying last week. I didn't want to make things worse." The way she said it made something inside the Tycoon shift again. Children should never feel responsible for adult problems. They shouldn't have to act older than their age just because life is unfair. Zara wiped her daughter's tears and looked at Mr. Rafiq with embarrassment. "Sir, I'm so sorry. I didn't know she was doing this. I never wanted her to get involved in my problems." He shook his head gently. "This isn't about blame." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I just want to understand why it reached this point. Why didn't you tell me you were struggling?" Zara looked down at her hands. "Because it's not your responsibility, sir. You already give me a job. I didn't want to burden you with my personal issues. I thought I could manage somehow. I just needed more time." He thought about that quietly. She wasn't wrong, but she wasn't right either. He didn't run his home like a machine. He had known her for years. She was loyal, honest, hardworking. She always completed her duties without complaint. To think she had been holding back tears late at night, that hit him unexpectedly. He turned back to the girl. "And you," he said softly, "you should be in school. That's your job. That's what will help your mother the most in the long run." She sniffed and nodded slowly. "I know. I just didn't want us to lose our room again. I didn't want to see her cry." Her mother hugged her even tighter. "You're my child. It's my job to protect you, not the other way around." The Tycoon let them sit like that for a moment. The bond between them felt strong and painful at the same time. He realized how much they had been going through quietly, without asking for help from anyone. After a long pause, he took a deep breath. "All right, here's what we're going to do." Both mother and daughter looked up at him nervously. "First," he said firmly, You're going back to school. No more missing classes. No more working. You focus on studying, nothing else. The girl nodded, her tears slowing. Second, he continued, I'll talk to your school. We will fix whatever issues came from your absence. Zara looked overwhelmed. Sir, you don't have to. I'm not finished, he said gently. She quieted. Third, I want both of you to stop worrying about the rent for now. You can stay here in the staff quarters without extra payment until things get stable again. Zara's eyes widened. Sir, that's too much. I can't accept. You can, he interrupted. And you will. This isn't charity. You have worked for me for years. You've been loyal and responsible. I take care of the people who take care of my home. She covered her face with her hands as tears streamed down. Thank you. I don't know what to say. He continued speaking calmly. And lastly, I will increase your salary. Not by a small amount. Enough so you can breathe. Enough so your daughter never has to think about washing dishes at 3 in the morning again. Zara looked stunned. The girl stared at him, her tears replaced by disbelief. Sir, Zara whispered, I can't tell you how much this means. He nodded lightly. It's only fair. There was a long pause in the room as they absorbed his words. The girl finally spoke, her voice still soft but steadier than before. Thank you, sir. I'll go back to school. I promise. He smiled gently. Good. That's all I want from you. As he turned to leave the room, he noticed how the girl leaned into her mother, relieved for the first time in weeks. He could almost feel the weight lifting off her small shoulders. Walking down the hallway, he exhaled slowly. His mind was clearer now, but something inside him remained unsettled. He knew helping them was only the beginning. There had to be more he could do to make sure the girl stayed safe and focused on school. He stopped midway through the hall and looked back, thinking of her tired face from last night. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had failed to notice her struggles sooner. And now that he knew, he wasn't going to ignore it again. As he walked away, he decided that his household needed to change. And he knew exactly where he would start. The morning moved quietly through the house, but inside the Tycoon's mind, nothing felt quiet at all. Even though he had made promises to help the family, he couldn't shake the images that kept replaying. Amina standing on that stool, barely awake, washing dishes that were never her responsibility. He had seen many things in his life, but something about that moment had hit him deeply. After leaving their room, he walked back to his study and sat in the large chair by the window. The sunlight warmed the space, but his thoughts stayed heavy. He kept asking himself the same questions. How long had this been going on? Why hadn't anyone in the staff noticed? And how had a child, someone so young, become burdened with adult struggles? He leaned back slowly and let out a long breath. He knew feelings alone wouldn't solve anything. He needed to take action. A short while later, he called the head of the staff, an older man named Idris, who had been with the household for many years. When Idris stepped into the study, he looked slightly worried, as if sensing that something serious had happened. Sir, you wanted to see me? He asked respectfully. Yes, the Tycoon replied. Sit down. Idris sat carefully, his hands resting on his knees. I need to ask you something, the Tycoon began. Have you noticed anything unusual about Zara or her daughter recently? Idris thought for a moment. Unusual? No, sir. They seem the same as always. Zara works hard. The girl comes after school. Nothing strange. The Tycoon studied his expression. Idris wasn't hiding anything. He genuinely didn't know. What about the kitchen? The Tycoon continued. Any signs someone might have been there late at night? Idris shook his head. No, sir. The night cleaners leave at 10. After that, it stays locked unless someone on your orders needs to enter. The Tycoon sighed quietly. So the girl must have been sneaking in carefully, making sure no one saw her. He dismissed Idris with a nod. All right, thank you. That will be all. When he was alone again, he realized the situation had gone unnoticed because the girl had been too careful, too quiet. She had acted with the desperation of someone who felt she had no choice. And that was what bothered him most. A child should never feel trapped like that. He He stood up and walked toward the window, looking out across the garden. Birds hopped along the grass, pecking lightly at the ground. Life seemed peaceful out there. It made the heaviness inside him feel even sharper. He remembered the girl's small voice trembling as she said she didn't want her mother to cry again. That moment had stayed with him all morning. He hadn't realized how much pressure Zara had been under. She had worked for him for years, never once asking for help. And now, because she tried so hard to handle everything alone, her daughter had gotten pulled into adult burdens she should never have faced. After another long moment of thought, he decided he needed to learn more. Not because he doubted them, but because he needed to understand the full picture before making decisions that would impact their future. He left his study and walked to the kitchen, where a few helpers were preparing lunch. They stopped what they were doing when he entered. He didn't stay long. He simply looked around, studying the space. Everything was clean and organized. The countertops shined. The sink was empty. No one would ever guess that a tired child had been standing there just hours before, scrubbing dishes with shaky hands. He ran his fingers over the edge of the sink. It was cold now, but the memory of last night made it feel different. He stepped back. Watching the staff plan meals and work together gave him an idea, a direction his mind hadn't considered before. Perhaps the issue wasn't only about the girl. Perhaps it was about the entire structure of the household. Maybe things had gotten too strict, too distant, too professional. Enough for a small child to believe she had to sneak into a kitchen instead of asking for help. He left the kitchen deep in thought, and made his way toward the living room where he often sat in the afternoons. He dropped onto the couch and let his mind settle. He could hear soft footsteps outside the door. When he turned, he saw the girl peeking inside, hesitating. She looked nervous again, unsure if she was disturbing him. He motioned with his hand. "Come in." She stepped inside slowly, her small hands clasped in front of her. "Sir, I just wanted to say thank you for this morning." He smiled gently. "You don't need to thank me. It's my responsibility to look after everyone who lives and works here." She nodded but still looked uneasy, as if she felt she didn't deserve kindness. He studied her quietly for a moment. She looked different now that it was daytime. Her hair was combed neatly, and she wore a simple shirt and jeans. But even with the sunlight on her face, something about her seemed older than her age, like life had forced her to grow up too quickly. "Sit," he said softly. She sat on the armchair across from him, looking small against the large cushions. "Tell me something," he said. "Why didn't you tell your mother what you were doing?" She looked down. "Because she already works too much. I didn't want to add more stress. And I thought if I could help, even a little, maybe she would worry less." He nodded slowly. "Do you think your mother wanted you to carry that weight?" "No," she whispered. "But I didn't know what else to do." Her honesty touched him. Children shouldn't think like that, he thought. Children shouldn't know that kind of fear. He leaned forward slightly. "You know, you don't have to solve problems on your own. Adults are here for that. Your only job is to study and grow. That's how you help your mother. Not by losing sleep and skipping school." She nodded, tears forming in her eyes again. He softened his tone. "You're a good child, a very good child. But you shouldn't feel alone." She wiped her eyes and whispered, "I won't do it again." "Good," he said kindly. "Because from now on, things will be different. Better." She looked up, a mixture of hope and uncertainty in her eyes. "What do you mean?" "You'll see," he replied with a small smile. There was a gentle knock on the door, and one of the helpers entered. "Sir, the school called. They said someone from your office contacted them to ask about her records." He nodded. "Yes, tell them I will speak with them personally." The helper left. The girl looked nervous again. "Am I in trouble?" "Not at all," he said. "I just want to fix everything, so you can go back without any problems." She let out a slow breath of relief. A moment later, Zara appeared at the doorway. Her eyes were still a bit red, but she looked calmer than earlier. "Sir? You asked for me?" "Come in," he said. She stepped inside and bowed her head respectfully. "I don't know how to thank you for everything. I never expected." He raised a hand gently to stop her. We're not here to talk about gratitude. We're here to talk about moving forward. She nodded quietly. I want you to take tomorrow off, he continued. Both of you, rest, spend time together, clear your minds. Zara looked surprised. But sir, the work will be handled, he said. Your health and your daughter's future come first. Tears resurfaced in her eyes, but she blinked them back quickly. And starting next week, he added, I want your daughter to attend extra tutoring. I'll arrange it. She's missed school, and I want her to catch up. The girl looked shocked. Tutoring? Really? Yes, he replied. But only after you get enough sleep. No more late nights. She nodded eagerly. As the conversation continued, he noticed something change in both of them. Their shoulders loosened. Their expressions softened. It was as if the fear that had been weighing on them for weeks had finally started to lift. When they left the room, he sat back on the couch and closed his eyes for a moment. He didn't feel finished. Not yet. But he felt calmer. He had taken the first steps. The house felt different too, lighter somehow. But deep inside, he knew that there was more he needed to discover. The girl had said she cleaned other houses too. Someone must have been allowing her to work there. Someone must have known. He opened his eyes slowly. He wasn't going to let that slide. Not after what he had seen. Not after what she had been through. He stood up, straightened his shoulders, and made his way toward his office, determined to uncover whatever else had been hidden in the shadows. The next morning arrived quietly, but nothing about the atmosphere in the big house felt normal. The Tycoon woke up earlier than usual, his mind restless from the events of the night before. He kept thinking about the moment he had walked into the kitchen and seen the young girl hunched over the sink, washing dishes with tired hands at 3 in the morning. That image refused to leave his thoughts, as if it had been carved into his memory. Something about it felt wrong, and deep inside, he knew her reason for skipping school would reveal something far more complicated than a simple excuse. He walked downstairs slowly, wanting to observe everything with fresh eyes. The home was usually filled with the quiet hum of early morning preparation. Maids tidying up, the cook arranging ingredients, soft footsteps moving from one task to another. But today, he noticed a certain heaviness in the air, as if everyone sensed something unusual. The girl was not in the kitchen this time. Only her mother stood there, moving around with careful steps, trying not to look nervous. It was obvious she was troubled, her hands trembling slightly as she cut fruit. The Tycoon stood near the doorway for a moment, simply watching. The woman noticed him and straightened quickly, wiping her hands on her apron. She gave him a polite greeting, but her eyes told a different story, worry mixed with guilt. He didn't ask about her daughter immediately. He wanted to approach the situation gently. After all, the woman had been working in his home for years. She never asked for anything, never complained, and always did more than what was required. She was hardworking and respectful, and he had always admired her dedication. The last thing he wanted was to make her feel threatened or judged. Instead, he sat at the dining table and asked for tea. While she prepared it, he watched her closely. The way she moved was slower today. Something was clearly weighing on her. When she brought the tea, he thanked her, took one sip, and then finally spoke. My driver told me your daughter wasn't feeling well yesterday, he said softly. And last night, I found her in the kitchen very late. I hope everything is all right. The woman hesitated. Her lips tried to form words, but nothing came out. It was as though she was deciding whether to tell the truth or keep something hidden. She lowered her eyes and clasped her hands tightly, a gesture he had come to recognize in people who carried too many worries. She didn't mean to trouble you, sir, she finally said in a quiet voice. She had trouble sleeping. He could sense the lie immediately. It was thin, fragile, and carried no weight behind it. He didn't push further, not wanting to cause her distress. Instead, he gently changed the subject and asked if her daughter was at home. The woman nodded but avoided eye contact. Later that afternoon, he decided to take a small step forward. He asked one of the other staff members, someone who had known the maid and her daughter for years. The staff member seemed hesitant to share details, but after the tycoon assured them he meant no harm, they spoke quietly. The girl, they said, had been acting differently for weeks. She often stayed up late, sometimes helping her mother with work even when she wasn't asked to. She had been skipping meals, seemed tired all the time, and had recently missed several days of school. No one knew why. Her mother kept insisting everything was fine, but the staff could tell something was happening behind the scenes, something the mother didn't want anyone to know. This information only deepened the tycoon's concern. He was not the type of man who interfered in the private lives of his employees, but he also wasn't the kind of person who ignored someone in trouble. The girl's weary expression, her fragile posture, the way her hands trembled slightly while holding the plate, those signs had stirred something inside him, a sense of responsibility he couldn't ignore. He decided he would talk to the girl directly, but he didn't want to corner her or make her feel pressured. Children often opened up only when they felt safe, and he needed to make sure she understood he cared. The next day, he found her sitting alone in the small garden behind the house. She was peeling vegetables, her school bag lying unopened beside her. She looked tired again, dark circles shadowing her eyes. When she noticed him approaching, she stood quickly, unsure of what to do. "It's all right," he said with a calm smile. "You can sit." She slowly sat down, her hands nervously twisting the edge of her shirt. "I wanted to talk to you," he began gently. "Last night, I saw you working very late, and I noticed you haven't been going to school. I was wondering if something is happening that you want to share." The girl shook her head quickly. She didn't speak, but the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. It wasn't the kind of fear one had from being caught doing something wrong. It was the fear of revealing something that might cause pain. He didn't push her. He simply sat down on a nearby bench and let the silence settle naturally. "I won't be angry," he said softly, "and I won't tell anyone anything you don't want me to. I just want to help if I can." She looked down at her hands. Her breathing became shallow, as though she was trying to hold something in. Minutes passed quietly. Finally, she spoke in a whisper. "I wasn't supposed to be in the kitchen," she said. "My mother told me not to help, but I couldn't sleep." He nodded slowly. "And school?" Her shoulders tensed. She didn't answer. He waited patiently. "I didn't go because—" She paused, her voice tightening. "Because I was scared." The tycoon felt his heart drop slightly. Fear was not something a child should feel about going to school. Something serious was happening. "What are you scared of?" he asked gently. Before she could answer, her mother's voice came from behind them, calling her name. The girl immediately stood, her expression panicked. Her mother hurried over, apology written all over her face, and quickly guided her daughter inside. The tycoon didn't stop them. He simply watched, realizing something much deeper was happening. Something the mother was desperately trying to protect her daughter from. That night, he decided he would no longer stay in the dark. The girl needed help, and he was in a position to offer it. He only needed to understand what the problem truly was. But he had a feeling he was about to uncover something far more emotional than he ever expected. The days following the events of that night became a new routine for the household. The tycoon, Mr. Rafik, had made his decision clear. The young girl would return to school, her mother would be relieved of extra financial worries, and their lives would become steadier. But it was not just about practical help. It was about rebuilding trust, confidence, and a sense of safety that had been missing for weeks. On the first morning after the conversation, the girl woke up feeling lighter than she had in a long time. She could hear birds chirping outside the window and the faint rustle of leaves in the garden. Normally, mornings felt rushed and stressful for her. But today, she had no chores waiting, no tasks to keep her from eating a proper breakfast or packing her school bag. She smiled faintly, a feeling of hope stirring in her chest. Her mother, too, moved with a slightly different energy. She wasn't tense or hurried. She prepared breakfast calmly, taking time to sit down and eat with her daughter for the first time in months. The conversation between them was soft and filled with laughter, small jokes, and shared memories that had been lost to worries about rent and work. Even the tycoon, walking past their room, noticed the change. The heaviness had lifted, replaced with a fragile but growing sense of relief. When the girl arrived at school that morning, she felt nervous but determined. Her teachers noticed the absence from previous weeks, and she confessed the truth in a low voice. She didn't try to hide what had happened or make excuses. Instead, she explained how she had stayed home to help her mother, and how she had secretly been taking on work at home and elsewhere. Her honesty surprised the teachers, who immediately promised to help her catch up. They arranged extra tutoring, assignments to make up for missed work, and encouragement to regain confidence in her studies. Back at the mansion, Mr. Rafiq continued quietly observing. He made subtle adjustments in the household to ensure that no child, staff, or family member felt the same pressures his maid's daughter had endured. He increased the salary of the maid, adjusted her working hours to allow more rest, and personally oversaw the arrangements for her daughter's tutoring and school support. It was more than charity, it was an understanding that trust and care were central to a household functioning smoothly, especially when children were involved. Over the next few weeks, the young girl adjusted to her renewed school schedule. Her teachers were patient, giving her time to catch up, and her classmates welcomed her back with curiosity and support. For the first time in weeks, she could focus on learning, reading, and understanding lessons without the heavy weight of adult responsibilities pressing on her shoulders. She smiled more easily, laughed more freely, and discovered that school could feel safe and engaging again. At home, her mother found solace in the relief of having her child's education prioritized. She no longer had to fear her daughter's fatigue or the hidden burdens she carried. For the first time, she could share her own worries with the Tycoon, explaining the difficulties of rent, bills, and basic survival, and receive understanding instead of judgment. That trust made her feel lighter, supported, and more confident in navigating daily life. One afternoon, the Tycoon invited both mother and daughter to his study. He wanted to check on their progress and understand how they were adjusting. They walked in quietly, still somewhat shy in his presence, but their eyes shone with newfound confidence. He asked about school, home life, and whether the previous arrangements were helping. Their honest answers and open smiles assured him that the support had made a real difference. "It feels like a weight has been lifted," the girl said softly. "I can focus on learning now, and I don't worry so much." Her mother nodded. "Yes, sir. We are so grateful. We never thought anyone would notice what we were going through." The Tycoon leaned back in his chair, a quiet satisfaction settling over him. He had always believed in fairness, responsibility, and compassion, but seeing it applied in real life, changing the course of two lives, brought a sense of fulfillment he hadn't expected. Days turned into weeks, and the household settled into a new rhythm. The girl excelled at school, gaining confidence with each completed lesson and assignment. Her mother became a stronger presence at home, no longer haunted by constant worry or fear of losing control. The Tycoon continued to monitor subtly, ensuring that progress continued and that no one felt neglected or overlooked. One evening, the girl came home from school, her bag heavy with books but her heart light. She ran to her mother and hugged her tightly. "I got a good grade today," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling. Her mother smiled, hugging her back, feeling proud and relieved. The struggles of weeks past seemed distant now, replaced by hope and growth. The Tycoon, watching from a distance, reflected on that night he had found her in the kitchen. He realized that small actions, understanding, and support could make enormous changes in someone's life. A few words, an act of kindness, a promise kept. These could transform despair into hope, fear into confidence, and struggle into opportunity. He knew that while life would continue to present challenges, this family had gained a new perspective. They understood that help could be offered and accepted without shame, that education was a right, and that a child's world should be filled with learning, laughter, and safety rather than burdens beyond their years. From that day forward, the young girl never had to worry about washing dishes at 3 in the morning again. She returned to school, learned with dedication, and nurtured dreams that had once been overshadowed by responsibility too heavy for her small shoulders. Her mother worked with more ease and confidence, supported by the Tycoon's guidance and understanding. The household thrived in subtle but important ways. It wasn't just about money, support, or scheduling. It was about care, observation, and empathy. Everyone in the home, including the staff, felt the difference. A sense of mutual respect and attentiveness settled in, creating a safe and nurturing environment for all. Years later, the girl would look back at that time not as a period of fear or struggle, but as a turning point. A moment when someone noticed her quietly suffering, stepped in, and changed her path. And for the Tycoon, the memory of that night at 3 in the morning would remain a reminder that even small gestures of concern could ripple outward, changing lives in ways no one could predict.